Hello everybody and welcome back to another Kings of War Battle Report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have Goblins versus Elves. This battle was fought at 2250 points, and the scenario was Dominate. Before I get into the lists themselves, as I'm sure most of you will have noticed, this battle was not part of the recent Masters Prep event I went to. We'll be continuing that sometime later this week, but for now, let's talk about this week's regular battle. So starting out with my opponent's list, I think it's a pretty interesting elf army, where we have a horde of kindred archers with the heart-seeking chant, followed by a horde of kindred tall spears. Then we have a horde of Therenian Sea Guard with the Wine of Elvenkind, a horde of Draken Riders with the Chant of Hate, 2 ASBs, one of whom has the Diadem of Dragonkind and is mounted, the other has the Lute of Insatiable Darkness. Then we have an Elven Mage with the Shroud of the Saint, and a Mystical Dragon Kindred Lord. Following that, we have the allies of the elves, the Forces of Nature, which involves a horde of Forest Shamblers, a horde of Sylph Talon Riders, and a Centaur Chief with a bow. As for my thoughts on the army, I think it's pretty good. The only two things that I'm not a fan of are I don't like these tall spears, and then I don't like the fact that this Forest Shambler horde exists. I think that the Shamblers should just be a regiment, and the tall spears should be swapped out for something like Palace Guard maybe, or Knights. I think Knights would be really good. I know my opponent, this is the same army that I played before where the guy ran the Green Lady formation, and I think that a lot of this comes from that. It's the next version of that, but yeah, I think it's pretty close to being a very solid elf army, although it's kind of hard to not be one. And those are the only two things that I look at and go like, yeah, those could be a little better. But anyway, I think it's a good army. Moving forward, here is my Goblin army. So this was after the recent Masters Prep event. I kind of got a bee in my bonnet about spamming weakness, or, you know, quote spamming weakness, running 3 wizards with it. And I went, well, it might be good in goblins. That's one of the choices. And this is what I came up with. So starting out, we have the Carriages of Carnage formation, which involves 2 mincers and then a mincer mob, which is the new regiment of mincers they came out with. It's pretty deadly. They have d6 plus 24 attacks, they all have big shield and no yellow belly and all that stuff now. And what the formation gives them is +1 speed, which puts them at speed 6, which is just way better than speed 5. It's so much better. Anyway, then I followed up with 2 regiments of spitters, followed by 3 hordes of trolls, 1 with the Dwarven Ale, 1 with the Chalice of Wrath, and 1 with the Staying Stone. Then I have 2 Fleabag Rider Sniff regiments, 2 Flaggots, one of whom with Kevinar's Flying Hammer and is mounted, then the other with Warbow of Kaba. Then I brought all 3 Whizzes, all of whom have weakness, and 1 has the Inspiring Talisman, and bringing up the rear, I have 2 Colossal Giants. So this army is actually pretty similar to what I would say my Ogre army was, which is to say I brought... It's not that big, especially for a Goblin army. I have a lot of large infantry in the trolls, and then I have these Colossal Giants, which are definitely a unit that can take a punch and then deliver one. And the idea here is that I can get 3 weakness out on your units, so facing off against superior armies that have superior range to me isn't the biggest worry, as I have very high toughness. And I have very high toughness. The units that are not tough are ranged units, like the Spitters and the Fleabag Rider Sniffs, and then everything else, it can definitely take it. Lastly, I like the idea that it has so much regen in it, but we'll see how it does in the coming battle. So here is the table, and I will go over the terrain real quick. So starting in the lower right-hand corner, we have a height 6 forest. Then to the left of it, we have a height flat piece of terrain. Above that, we have a height 5 piece of impassable. Above that, another height 5 piece of impassable. Then to the right of that, we have a height 2 hill. In the middle of the table, we have another height 6 forest. Above that, we have a height 5 piece of impassable. And then below that, another height 2 hill. Oh, and up in the right-hand corner, this is the beginnings of a height flat piece of terrain. So pretty standard terrain layout. I wanted to get a bit more of a varied table, but it was actually really busy, really packed in the game store tonight. And in fact, I saw the most games of Kings of War being played in a public space, so not in a tournament, that I've ever seen. So that was great. And considering So at least in this store, it's I'm kind of the person that got the Kings of War ball rolling, and it's nice to see things working without me administrating, right? It's nice to know that people will play regardless of whatever I do. So that's cool. Lastly, let's talk about the scenario itself. So in Dominate, starting with a point in the center of the table, which is about there, and radiating out. So you have a bit of a 12-inch radius. So what you're trying to do is get the majority of the silhouette of all your units within that 12, and the army that has the highest unit strength within that 12-inch bubble will win. So goblins have a natural advantage here, as we're much higher unit strength than the elves, but the elves have a lot of shooting there, so it is quite worrisome. Now, talking about the armies themselves, unfortunately I know I didn't take any pictures of the goblin deployment, so I'll go over that real quick. Back here, this little guy, that is my first goblin wizard with nothing, I mean weakness, but that's it. In front of him, that is the first horde of trolls. These ones have the dwarven ale. Behind them is my goblin whiz with inspiring talisman. Then I have 2 mincers right here, so 2 mincers. In the middle, a horde of trolls. These have the Chalice of Fury. Behind them, my first colossal giant. Then I have my first ASB with the Warbow of Kappa. In front of them, the last horde of trolls. These ones have the Staying Stone. Then behind them, I have a horde of mincers. Then off to the left again, we have my last whiz with weakness. Then to the left of that, we have the 2 regiments of spitters. To the left of that, we have the 1st regiment of sniffs. To the right of that, we have the 2nd regiment of sniffs. Behind them is my, somewhere right about here, is my ASB with Kevin R's Flying Hammer, or as we call it here, Kevin's Hammer. And then lastly, I have my my 2nd colossal giant is right there. So yeah, the goblin deployment here is it's a little denied flank. I'm kind of ignoring this side of the table as he has so much shooting over here, right? He's got a dragon, he's got some archers, and these Sylph Talon Riders. And since I'm trying to get to the center of the table, I thought I'd just go like, let him have it, and deploy hard on the left here to deal with his actual combat units. So that's the plan. Let's go over the elf deployment. So the elf deployment I did take pictures of, and here is a beautiful model from Privateer Press. I can't remember what it's actually called. Colloquially, we call it Zapdos because it kind of looks like the Pokemon. But yeah, so that is his horde of Sylph Talon Riders, or the beginnings of it. Then to the left of it, we have the horde of archers with Heart-Seeking Chant. Then we have the Mystic Dragon. Then off to the left of that, we have the horde of Seaguard, who are facing off to the left, but they do have Nimble, so it's not that important. Then to the left of that, we have the horde of Spear Elves. Behind them, this is the ASB on Horse, which is like this. I know my opponent actually has several models that'll fit into this range, as this is the almost entirely the what is it called? The Retribution of Syra line from War Machine. And I know he has mounted models for that. He just hasn't put one together yet. But anyway, that's the mounted ASB with the diadem. And then next to them is the Mage. This is the Shroud of Saint Mage. Then, oh, there's an airplane going above. Anyway, then we have the 2nd ASB. This is the one with the Loot of Insatiable Darkness. Now, to the left of that, we have the horde of Shamblers who have already shambled forward. Then behind them, the Centaur Chief. And finally, off here on the left on their own is the Draken Rider Horde. So yeah, pretty, I feel like it's a standard elf deployment. They're fast enough to redeploy, so it's not that big of a deal, and he wants to make sure that he has an equal kind of strength spread across the table, so good plan. Oh, and a second picture. And here we go on to turn 1. So turn 1, the goblins win the roll-off, and we advance forward. I decide to run my trolls with the Dwarven Brew right into all these archers. I'm not too afraid, as I plan to just cast weakness out. I take my mincers, one faces forward, so the idea is to have my mincers covering the area that the Mystic Dragon can land in, right? So no matter where it lands, I will charge it. So that's the plan. I move these trolls, the Chalice of Wrath trolls, as far forward as they can. The trolls with the Staying Stone just keep pace. Behind them, yeah, the Mincer is facing out to deal with these Shamblers if they choose to get aggressive. I don't think they will, but they can. These dice here, the white ones represent how far the Shamblers can charge, and then this pink one is the Draken Riders. So my Sniffs want to move just out of charge range, and they do. And lastly, I have a Colossal Giant just sort of threading the needle between this piece of terrain and the board edge. So yeah, it's within range for these Draken Riders to charge it, but I'm not super afraid as it is inspired due to my ASB. You can actually just see it poking out right there. My ASB is within 6 of it, and the Draken Riders are pretty unlikely to kill it or one-round it with a reroll, as I think on average they do 13-ish wounds with Chant of Fate, so I'm not too afraid. And other than that, nothing. Oh, I guess all the heroes sort of move around. I have my Wizzes just redistribute themselves to make sure I can get weakness onto his range units, and that's the plan. So I have this Wiz here cast onto the archers with Heartseeking Chant. I have this Wiz cast onto the Mystic Dragon, and then I have this Wiz cast onto the Tyranian Sea Guard. And all 3 of my weaknesses go off this turn, so that is great. And yeah, you can see these little blue tokens, these blue shields are representing weakness right now. Other than that, I shoot into the Draken Riders here, and I do, I think, 5 wounds with my Sniffs, because I didn't have anything else. The Spitters shoot into the Shamblers and don't do anything. But yeah, I end up doing 5 wounds here and get a very lucky Waver, which is great. Wavering Draken Riders turn 1 is about as good as I can hope for. So yep, that's great, and we move on to turn 1 for the Elves. So turn 1 for the Elves goes about how I expect it to, which is the Elves advance forward, but not too quickly. So the Draken Riders can't really move anywhere. The Shamblers don't want to move anywhere. Their Druid friend moves forward to just fire his bow at stuff, and then the Spearmen and Tyranian Sea Guard just line up right here to make sure that they have targets with their 12-inch charge range and their 24-inch bows. So the idea, I think, is that the Tyranian Sea Guard want to shoot into these trolls along with his archers and the Sylph Talon Riders if possible, just to get a waver. Trolls aren't that hard to waver, and even with the Dwarven Brew, I mean, even if I pass it, none of these units are within 12 of me, so seems like a pretty solid move. My opponent originally thinks, well, maybe I could just charge the Mystic Dragon into here, but then he remembers, well, why would I? I have all these bows, and sees that the Mystic Dragon actually has a charge into one of my Mincers. So this was a mistake by me. I should have had this Mincer, which I've replaced with the Proxy Base, just a little over to the left here, because then there was no landing spot, and you know, if you wanted to charge, he has to charge trolls, or charge this Mincer, right, land in the woods, end up disrupted, and be in front of a giant and a bunch of trolls, which is not really where that thing wants to be. So, small mistake by me. And yeah, just showing off that charge. And here is the end of the turn. My opponent fires off a few bows. I think what is this thing? The Centaur Chief fires into my Wiz on the left, ends up doing 2 wounds to me, but doesn't get a waiver, which is great because I'm only a 9/11, I think, or maybe an 8/10, and I think I'm actually out of 6 of my Flaget, so yeah, not the best. And over here with the trolls on the right, yeah, my opponent does 3 wounds to me and manages to roll an 11, which on trolls gives them a waiver, which is, that's just troll luck, I guess. But to, you know, get some good luck here, my opponent charges in with a Mystic Dragon. I think a Mystic Dragon has 12 attacks, something like that, 12 or 14 attacks, I think it's 12, into my Mincer. And granted, the dragon does have weakness on it right now, so it's only going to be effectively crushing 2, but still, that's wounding me on a 4, so it's going to be 3s and 4s to hit and wound, and only does 3 wounds. So that's very nice for me, and my opponent actually needs brutal because his bad dice continues to even get a waiver on this 9/11 unit. So all in all, pretty good turn for the goblins for 1, and we move on to turn 2. So turn 2, the goblins that can advance do advance. So some of that means the Mincer, who is wavered, just backs up. The other Mincer has a charge onto the Mystic Dragon and takes it. Excuse me. Yeah, otherwise on the right, these trolls, I roll the Dwarven Brew. I get a 6 apparently, and I just immediately forget about it. So I thought I failed. I thought I rolled a 2. I could have sworn I rolled a 2. My opponent insists I rolled a 6. So yeah, I just don't advance them. I do know I roll for the regen and regen none of the wounds back, so that's unfortunate. I decide that this Colossal Giant is better facing to the right now, as I think this Mystic Dragon is going to be stuck fighting Mincers for a while, or at least one more turn, and then the Giant can go for the finish, so I do that. Otherwise, my Trolls advance into the trees and next to them. So the Trolls in the trees, the idea is if he wants to charge, he will be hindered on those charges. I want to spam out some weakness, not that guy, some weakness onto the units that are around me, and make it so when he charges in, not a lot happens. So that's the plan. I decide to take these Mincers and move facing the left because I expect the Draken Riders to be up and operational again, along with the Shamblers. So they're getting ready to countercharge, and that's about it. Oh, I guess talking about the movement of the Sniffs, they just advance forward, mostly because I want this Colossal Giant to be in the fight. So to do that, I want to make it so it can take a charge from the Draken Riders in the front, but I don't think it can take Draken Riders and the Shamblers. So instead I decide to move one of my units of Sniffs forward because now he cannot physically wheel past the Sniffs to get to the Giant in one 90-degree wheel. So that's the plan, and everything else is just going to shoot into the Draken Riders because why not? Worked last time, didn't it? And yeah, just showing off this combat. And here is the end of, and I think it's the end of the turn actually, but end of turn on the left, you can see, yeah, I end up, oh, I forgot to mention that the wizard did cast heal onto the Draken Riders. It seems pretty obvious. And healed 2 or 3 wounds off, but then the goblins shoot at it again and put them on 8 wounds this time. I do not break them, but I do again get a waiver, so the Draken Riders wavered for turn 1 and 2. That is excellent news. But the rest of it goes not as well. So most of my weakness miss, so I miss with this weakness, I miss with this weakness. The only weakness I get off is with this wizard in the bottom corner that casts weakness onto the Sylph Talon Riders to make sure that they don't have Thunderous next turn, as I'm definitely within their 20-inch charge with a lot of my like my Mincers and my Trolls, right? So especially as I forgot to move these Trolls. But yeah, so just casting weakness to turn off their ability to really effectively deal with me. As for the combat with my Mincer versus this dragon, I do a couple wounds, but not enough to scare it at all, so it's still ready to go. But I'll take the wavered Draken Riders. That's pretty good. And we move on to turn 2 for the Elves, which goes a little better for them. So yeah, the Elves just decide to advance forward. I think this is at the end of the turn. Yeah, it definitely is because I forgot to take a picture. But on the left, let's start there. So we'll start with the Draken Riders, who get healed for 4 wounds, which is pretty good. The Shamblers charge into my Sniffs that are in front of them and just delete them. So that's not unexpected. And speaking of unexpected, this Centaur Chief decides to charge into my Wiz, who was already sitting on 2 wounds, and yeah, only does 1 wound to me. So hitting on 3, I think it's 5 attacks on 3s and 2s, and does 1 wound. It doesn't even shake this wizard, so get ready for that counter charge. And on the left, in the middle I mean, something unfortunate does happen, which is these Tall Spears charge into my Staying Stone Trolls and just obliterate them. My opponent does 11 wounds total, which I don't think is that bad. They have 30 attacks on 4s and 5s, right, with Elite, so 11 wounds isn't that isn't that bad, but then he rolls an 11 on the break test into an 11 on the break test. No, I wasn't inspired, so another mistake by me. But anyway, he rolls 11 on the break test, kills them off, which is unfortunate. But the Therenian Seaguard, who I failed to cast weakness on, and he did succeed at giving Bane Chant. That's a great arrow. So this guy gives Bane Chant to these Therenian Seaguard. They only manage 6 wounds on my trolls in the woods, and actually I think he does get a waiver though. But fortunately for me, they have Fury, so they can just countercharge anyway. Some other units just take some pip damage, so these trolls in the front take a little bit more than pip damage, as the Diadem of Dragonkind just really unloads onto him, does like 4 or 5 wounds, I want to say, on its own. I end up with 10 wounds on me. My opponent again gets a waiver, so we're going to hope that the Headstrong goes off. And yeah, the Mystic Dragon goes for the countercharge onto my Mincer, doing 4 wounds, but doesn't even shake it, so that's really good for me. That means that all 3 of these units are ready for the counter, and then this big bird shoots into my Mincer. No, this big bird shoots into one of my whizzes, and just completely flubs. So it's a bit of a mixed bag so far for the goblins, but you know, elves tend to dominate the early rounds anyway, so we'll see how it goes later. And we move on to turn 3. So turn 3 for the goblins, we've got some charges. So starting on, actually this is again the end of the round, sorry about that guys, but on the left, let's start with that. So my Wiz decides to not charge into the Centaur Chief, and I just unload with all the bows I have. I do a ridiculous amount of damage for considering what I was doing. I do 4 wounds to it, but unfortunately do not waver or kill it. Then on the upper left, you might have noticed that my Colossal Giant that was here is now over here. And that is because I could just, if we roll 2 pictures back, so the Colossal Giant's right here, and it can just barely see the end of these spearmen using its line of sight. It's also in the rear of those spearmen, and all it has to do is adjust like this, hit the corner, and then slide. So yeah, getting a Colossal Giant in the rear of your infantry, never a good thing. And also I have a Mincer for the front. I originally wanted the Mincer to charge into the Shamblers, but they're just at a 12, so The Colossal Giant was placed over here to deal with Draken Riders, but I don't think my opponent was expecting to kill off these trolls either. I wasn't even expecting them to try. So, yeah, I'll take what I can get though. And in the other combats, my Sniffs decide to charge into the Draken Riders because they do, they're almost identical in melee as they are in ranged. As far as this combat goes. The reason why they charge here is specifically because I think I can do 1 wound with 14 attacks on 5s and 5s, and if I do 1 wound, I'll turn off his flight and he'll have to deal with these Sniffs instead. So that's the plan, but instead they do a few wounds. They do like 3 or 4 wounds, and they again waver the Draken Rider, so it's just not a good day to be a Draken. Kevin here moves forward, throws Kevin's hammer at my... Oh, I forgot to mention, in turn 2, I threw Kevin's hammer just barely within range of these Draken Riders, and that's how they ended up being wavered, because I got it exactly. But apparently I threw Kevin's hammer, and they took it from me because I miss right now, and it's just gone, right? Otherwise, the Mincers did charge in and just don't really reform because I want to get into these guys, because my trolls get a counter charge into the Therenian Seaguard. I do 9 wounds to him, but that's not the most. Even with a possible brutal, it still would have been an 11 to break. So I do nothing there. Although I have cast weakness onto them to protect myself a little bit. My regen managed to regen 2 back. And then these guys regen 2 as well, but I do fail this. I mean, this is what I was really going for, is if you look here, these trolls who are headstrong are in the flank of these guys. So flanking trolls and front trolls probably would have spelled the end for the Seaguard, but I fail it and I just sit there instead. I do get weakness off on the archers, which is good, and to add to the good roll, my mincers plus this colossal giant delete the mystic dragon. So things are looking pretty good. Both the mincers decide to go forward, and both go forward 6. So, meh. And that's it for turn 3 for the goblins. Let's see what turn 4 holds for, or turn 3 holds for the elves. Turn 3 for the elves. Oh, actually, turn 3 for the elves. Again, it looks like I forgot to take some pictures, but turn 3, the Dragon Riders just sort of sit still. The Shamblers just turn around to deal with my Giant a little bit. Giant and the Mincer. The Centaur Chief charges into my Mincer with 5 attacks, does 4 wounds to it, which is pretty good, although it is 3s and 2s, I want to say, so it's not that hot. But yeah, it does 4 wounds to it. Thankfully, doesn't get the 10 to waver or the boxcars to kill. But my opponent does end up with his shooting able to kill off these trolls who have just sat here the whole game, or they move forward and then just got shot until they died, while the other trolls end up wavered again, taking 4 further wounds, or no, 6 further wounds from the Tyranian Sea Guard countercharge, even with weakness, as my opponent again slaps Bane Chant onto them. You can see that the ASB on the left here has advanced forward to block up the mincers. Between this ASB and this, was it Centaur Chief, I also cannot charge into these guys because he's dodging my Colossal Giant, and then I can't fit through here. So yeah, they're safe for now. On the right, you can see the Giant Rock has charged into one of my mincers. It is charged into the mincer that was on the left, while the mincer on the right just gets shot to hell from the, I think it's the diadem. It's either the diadem or the archers shoot into it. Oh, it is, yeah, it's the archers, and they delete one of my mincers while the diadem kills off my trolls. Both were already put to double 1, so again, rolling pretty well on that diadem. And yeah, the bird easily kills off the mincers. That's not terribly surprising. Or the other mincer, because I already had 3 wounds on it. My Giant, unfortunately, has decided to phase towards the middle of the table. Mostly because after I failed that Headstrong, I had to do something with this Giant. And that ended up being facing this way. If I hadn't failed that Headstrong, I would have had a Giant facing off against this rock. But if I hadn't failed that Headstrong, these guys probably would be dead too. So, you know, happens. And we move on to turn 4. So turn 4 for the goblins. We're just tearing through this game. And yeah, we mostly just get some charges off. So I decided to take a Giant into the ASB in the back here, while my Mincer Horde goes into the Centaur Chief, hoping to take them out. I move Kevin around to throw his hammer at the mage with the Shroud of the Saint, while taking my sniffs back into the Dragon Riders, hoping for another lucky waver, as they have been healed yet again. So we're just doing this back and forth grind. As for the other thing, oh yeah, the other charge is that my trolls go into the Tyranian Sea Guard along with the Colossal Giant, hoping to kill them off, especially as this giant bird is staring at my flank. I would rather not have that. And this is actually, I think, the roll. Yep, this is the roll for my Giant on the ASB. And you can see I have 1, 2, 3 hits total. So I only hit 3 times. Not the best. And these dice were already misses. Ignore that 6, since I had 12 attacks. So yeah, don't roll too well. I end up missing the weakness. Oh, no, I do get weakness off. Okay, I just missed the weakness off on the archers, but I do end up getting weakness on the Shamblers and on Big Bird here. So, pretty good. My Spitters here do nothing. I don't think they do any wounds. And in combat, I end up... Is there an end run? Yeah. So this is that combat. This one, I actually really like these models. I'll probably do a bit more, as I'm not a fan of the old Goblin Wolf Riders, and I have a ton of them, so I'll probably do a bit more work on them. But yeah, using Fenrisian Wolves, it's a classic. I enjoy it. Or a new classic, I guess. And this combat here, hopefully we can take out the Tyranian Sea Guard. They're already sitting on 9 wounds, so it'd be very unfortunate if I could not. And this one, yeah, if I can't kill an ASB, what even is this Giant? And here's the end of the round. yeah, so speaking of the middle, obviously I kill off the Tyranian Seaguard, but the order I do it in is I go with the Mincer first, hoping to kill off the Centaur. That one's easy, but then my Giant goes into that ASB, only hits with 3 of his attacks, and only wounds with 2 of them. So yeah, it's a 10 to kill, or no, 9 to kill because I have Brutal, and thankfully I get it even with the reroll and finish it off. So, you know, again, you don't roll, or it's not a bad roll until you roll Nerve, so kill that. With the ASB gone, I guess there's another one over here, but these guys put the Tyranian Seaguard that were here onto double ones and easily take care of them, turning like so to face towards the rock and the archers, I guess. Not really afraid of the rear, as I have, you know, a regiment of mincers and a troll or a giant ready to go over there. And you might notice I actually do own the Bonecracker Giant from Forge World. I've featured it in a few battle reports. It's basically toddler sized, but I only have one of them, and it's so out of scale with any of my other models that I just put down some random stuff on 75s for this game. But I'll have to think about what I'm going to do with the Giants in the future, as I'm not a big fan of the Mantic ones. Just personally, I think that they're a little out of scale, meaning that I think that they blew up the image a bit too large. Anyway, that's just my opinion. And we move on to turn 4. Whoop, that's an upside down picture. Let's try to get past it. Turn 4 for the elves. Oh, I forgot to mention this. So yeah, up here in the upper left, these dogs go into the Draken Riders, and I do, you know, a couple wounds. They're at 5, and I roll to see if I waver them again, and I roll a 5, and then I roll another 5, but unfortunately I just barely have it cocked on the back of this Mincer, and I'm just re-rolling all dice that are not exactly flat. And yeah, unfortunately I do not waver them, but it would have been kind of funny just to waver them for 3 turns on, you know, 10 plus rolls. Crazy. And yeah, so the Draken Riders finally get a charge. They go into my dogs looking to get a little revenge, and the Shamblers go into my troll. Now they are weak, meaning that they're, you know, minus, they don't have the crushing 1, so they're going to be 4s and 5s. I'm not really worried about that. And the bird goes into my trolls over here, as these trolls, I believe, are sitting on 8 wounds, I want to say. And the big bird can, even with weakness, could pop through them. So, you know, it's risky for me. And yeah, this is the end of the turn. You can see, yeah, there aren't that many pictures this one, because I was so close to the table behind me that the other person playing and I had to take turns on who got to be on that side of the table. That's how packed it was this night. So anyway, speaking of what happens in this turn, the Draken Riders, yeah, they end up killing off my dogs finally. Kevin's just standing there alone now. The Shamblers only do 1 wound to my Giant, which isn't even a roll because that Giant is a -20. While the big bird goes into these trolls, does a couple of wounds, and again wavers the trolls, but they do have fury, so that's not going to matter. And when he bounces back an inch, my other colossal giant's going to be able to see him. Lastly, we have so with my opponent shooting, he fires all the archers into my colossal giant, doing 6 wounds, and has a choice of what does he want the ASB to do. So the ASB can either fire its diadem on 5s and 5s into my troll and hope to put it up, you know, do like 2, 3 wounds, whatever, and get it up to that, or no, needing to do, no, I'm already at boxcars. So yeah, no, I'm not. With 2 wounds, I'd be at boxcars. So 2 or 3 wounds, and hope for that boxcar /11 with a reroll due to my Inspiring Talisman here. Or the diadem can fire into my whiz over here. And that whiz is all on its own. You don't take the individual negative for breath. So my opponent ends up doing that on 4s and 4s and does 2 wounds and yeah, fails it. So needing a 6 to at least waver, doesn't get it. Or 6 or 7, I'm not sure. But either way, rolls abysmally, does not get that. So not looking good for the old elves. And we move on to turn 5. So turn 5, goblins are really getting into it now. The bottom left-hand corner, my spitters have no target now that the Shamblers are actually engaged in combat, and decide to move forward, hoping to get some more lucky waivers on the Draken Riders. while my mincers have a flank charge onto his shamblers and a front charge with a colossal giant. And then over here I've got the last horde of trolls and the second colossal giant going into Big Bird, looking to kill that off. And I take my wizard that was here and just, I think I run off over here because I just want to cast weakness onto his archers. So that's the plan. With shooting, let's, yep, bam, at the end of the round. With my shooting, I end up, instead of going for a weakness, going for a lightning bolt onto this guy. I end up doing 3 wounds, don't get a break, but I do end up killing off the big birds because they are not inspired by the elves. So kill that off, and then I kill off the shamblers, leaving no forces of nature on the table. Unfortunately, with Kevin and the spitters in the bottom here, I don't manage to get a, what is that, a third lucky waiver on the Dragon Riders, and they're free to do as they want. Actually, a small mistake. I actually ended that battle report thinking that I was out of pictures, but I am not. So, on my opponent's turn 5, the Dragon Riders charge into the mincers here, looking to just, you know, get something out of it, and get that. The ASB, I think, just sits still to shoot with the archers, although I'm not exactly sure why you do that. But anyway, yeah, he's got this one charge in, easily kills off the mincers, but is staring down my trolls and my giant, and of course the mighty spitters in the bottom here. But yeah, oh, it's because I wavered this guy. Yeah, he could have backed up, but it's not enough. And with all the shooting, ends up doing 3 more wounds, it looks like, to my colossal giant, but does not get the kill on the -20. And yep, turn 6 rolls around, and turn 6 is a doozy. This is the end of the goblin turn. The archers are not dead. My opponents just picked them up as they are, they've got weakness from my wizard. My colossal giant here charges into the ASB, kills it off. Then the trolls just walk into the forest to consolidate their victory. I walk with these guys to the majority within 12 of the center. And then I charge in with this colossal giant and with these spitters who are uninhibited into the flank. My opponent had actually charged this wizard into Kevin and done 0 wounds, and I just return the favor and do nothing. And that is the end. That is the actual end of the game, which is the goblins have unit strength 3, 5, 6, 7 within 12, while my opponent has only a wizard and a horde of archers who are physically incapable of getting to the center. So that is the end of the go, and I hope you guys enjoyed the battle report, and until next time, bye!